afternoon. We are excited to share with you some information about the prep program allotment overview. We had the same webinar yesterday, so if you happened to join yesterday, just wanted to let you all know that today will be the same information that we covered yesterday. I've got several colleagues on the call today that support the work of the prep program allotment for residency, grow your own mentorship. I'm Allie Freelander. I'll kick us off today, and then I'll be passing that off to some of my colleagues. We've got a packed agenda for the next hour. We'll start with a LASO Cycle 4 overview. You may have heard of some of this, the information we'll share in the LASO overview webinars that were held in mid-September. After that, we'll dive into the prep program allotment, what it is and how it has evolved over time in its creation. Then we'll discuss the application overview and do a quick snapshot on two programs, Texas Mentorship Training and Texas Strategic Staffing for Residencies Grant, and then wrap up with next steps. A couple FYIs before we dive in. Please submit questions during the webinar using the Zoom Q&A. So if you toggle to the bottom, you should see a Q&A function. Very simple questions around the LASO process we may answer live during this webinar. Most other questions related to the prep program allotment, our team will take back and respond to through FAQs that we'll post to our website. Those FAQs will be updated on a rolling basis with a final document posted by November 3rd. And the reason we do that is we just want to make sure that we're getting consistent and clear information out to the field and that everyone has access to the answers to the questions that were asked. Also, our webinar slides and recordings are going to be posted to the LASO 4 cycle website after we complete this webinar today. And then general LASO questions you can share. You can email us at laso@tea.texas.gov. And then towards the end, I'll share some email addresses for inboxes for different programs that make up the prep program allotment. All right, so with that, let's dive in and do an overview of the LASO process. So what is LASO? It stands for the Learning Acceleration Support Opportunities, and it's a single consolidated application that combines grants, allotments, and in-kind supports. I'll talk a little bit in a moment around the difference between grants and allotments, but this is the first time that we are including allotments in a LASO process. Overall, this opportunity represents $500 million in estimated services and supports across the state of Texas. It includes 15 initiatives to support learning acceleration and innovation, and it is one application to access these funds. The opportunities for LASO range across several different categories: curriculum and instruction, education and training, more time, and innovative school models. The work of the prep program allotment fits under this education and training category and is really focused on talent pipeline supports. So I wanted to spend a bit of time talking about the difference between LASO grants and allotments. This is a question we frequently get as we're out talking to folks about the prep program allotment. On the left side of the screen, LASO grants, you'll see school systems are selected for funding based on a set of priority points or tiers. This might be familiar to a lot of you on the call that have applied for grants in the past. Oftentimes we'll get more interest in a grant than awards available. So TEA will apply priority points or funding tiers to select a subset of applicants for the program. On the right side of the screen, you'll see the LASO prep program allotment. And with this allotment, all school systems are selected for funding that both meet eligibility criteria and commit to statutorily based requirements. So all of the districts and school systems charters that apply, that meet the criteria and agree to the requirements will be funded. And that's a big difference between the two. Couple key points to emphasize and kind of reiterate what I had just voiced over. The prep program allotment is a non-competitive entitlement. In other words, all applicants that meet eligibility criteria and commit to the program requirements will be funded. And we'll talk a little more about what those requirements are throughout our time together this morning. Next, school systems apply for prep program allotment funding through the LASO Cycle 4 process. Even though it's an entitlement, it's an optional program, so we need to have a mechanism through which we identify which school systems are interested. So we have decided to leverage the LASO grant, given or the LASO cycle, given it streamlines the processes for our school systems. A quick note, statute requires the commissioner to set performance standards and goals for partnership programs and to review performance periodically. So we're in the process of drafting proposed rules, and these proposed rules will include a couple provisions that we wanted to make sure to communicate to you all at the start of this process. First, once approved for a partnership program, school systems will not need to reapply for continued funding. So the concept of an annual grant application does not exist in the way we are setting up this allotment. So once approved, school systems will not need to seek continual reapproval. Instead, we will conduct periodic reviews to ensure that programs are meeting those performance standards and goals that are set in the rulemaking process. And we'll talk about rulemaking timelines a little bit later this morning. All right, so this is a slide that many of you may have seen multiple times. This is called the LASO portfolio, those 15 opportunities of grayed out ones we're not talking about this morning. In this green box, in very small font, you'll see 3 programs under the prep program allotment. And one thing I wanted to call your attention to here is this far right column. All eligible districts may receive the allotment. So if you scan the far right column, you will see the estimated number of awards for other grants in LASO are less than the 1,200 school systems that we have across Texas. So those will institute priority points or funding tiers to determine who will be funded, and that's a big difference between those competitive grant processes and this allotment. The last row in that green box says Texas Strategic Staffing for Residencies Grant will provide a snapshot of what that work is and how it complements the prep residency program. And then we'll have full 1-hour webinars on that program later if that sparks your interest. So that last row is technically a grant, but it's bundled together with this allotment, given kind of the conceptual connections across programs. All right, so we wanted to dive in now to talk about the prep program allotment and do a deep dive. But a quick note here, and I'll reinforce this throughout our time together this morning. Overall, there are 5 programs that comprise the prep program allotment. 3 of those programs will be available for implementation in school year 26-27. Those will be the focus of our time together this morning, those 3 that are first available. And each one of those programs has a full hour-long deep dive that gets into the specifics of those programs. So some of the questions you have might be answered this morning, and some will likely be addressed in those follow-up webinars. And the purpose really of this time together this morning is to provide a space to show how the pieces really fit together. If you are a school system or an educator preparation program and you're like, how do these 5 programs in the prep allotment fit together? Which ones are we interested in? That's really the purpose of this time together today. So before diving into the specifics of what the prep program allotment is, I wanted to share kind of how we got here in the evolution and creation of the prep program allotment. And this is really rooted in some of the teacher pipeline challenges we've seen across the state of Texas over the past several years. First, wanted to start off just acknowledging that quality prep, when we're thinking about teachers coming into the classroom, is linked to stronger outcomes for students and teachers. In the space of educator preparation for teachers, there are some key research-based practices that we know accelerate their effectiveness and increase their retention once they become teachers of record. First is classroom practice. The more we can get teachers in classrooms practicing the craft with students before setting foot into a classroom day one with their own set of students, the more effective we know they will be. Second is content knowledge. We know that content knowledge is the strongest predictor of student achievement. And lastly, mentoring and coaching we know is really critical in the pre-service space and also during the first and or second year of teachers' development. So preparation pathways have varied greatly in implementation of these practices, and that has led to variance in student outcomes and teacher retention over time. So I wanted to share with you all some research that's come out of EPIC, University of North Carolina, looking at Texas teacher residencies. And The outcomes are, you might want to take a closer look at this at a later time, but really the outcomes show that first year teachers who completed a paid residency perform comparably to other first year teachers in math and are much more effective in reading. You might be like, well, how much more effective in reading? This study shows that first year teachers who were paid residents were as effective as fifth year teachers in reading. So think back to your time on campuses as a classroom teacher. This is really a phenomenal impact, both for that teacher development, likelihood to stay in the classroom, impact on students, impact on colleagues that they work with in their buildings. And also, if we were to kind of extrapolate this number, if all first year teachers had the same retention rate as these paid residents, approximately 3,600 fewer first year teachers would have left Texas public schools between the 22-23 and 23-24 school year. So again, putting yourself back in the space of first year teachers, administrators supporting first year teachers, colleagues of first year teachers, and knowing that turnover that can happen. This is really promising impact that we are seeing from paid teacher residencies. We also know that the pathway into the profession and the type of preparation that teachers have has shifted significantly over the past decade. If you're working in school systems, ed prep programs, in the Texas education K-12 ecosystem, you have likely felt the shift, especially over these past 5 years or so. With our most recent data available at TEA in the 24-25 school year, the majority of new teacher hires were uncertified. So that far right bar, that dark red section of that bar represents those 55% of uncertified teachers. Compare that to about a decade ago. On the left side of the screen, you'll see about 10% of the teachers entering Texas public schools were uncertified. One other piece I wanted to call your attention to is the bottom right side of the screen. We just talked about residencies, and we're seeing, because of some of the efforts through you all and partnerships across the state, we are seeing that this residency route into teaching has also been increasing. And we're going to spend a bit of time talking also about the traditional and alternative routes into the teaching profession. So that's kind of where we've been. A couple key data pieces that we've looked at around teacher preparation, the quality of that preparation, the status of certification for folks coming into the profession. The Teacher Vacancy Task Force came together several years ago, led by Kyla Jaramillo, who's on this call, and we'll share some more information later. Really examined, this was a task force led by 50 practitioners from across the state and looked at the issues related to teacher retention across Texas. And they came up with a set of comprehensive recommendations for the Texas legislature, for TEA, for school systems. Several of these recommendations were introduced during the 88th legislative session, and then again in the 89th legislative session. And the Texas legislature actually adopted the vast majority of the recommendations in the task force's report. One of those recommendations was around improving pipeline and pre-service preparation. And there was another recommendation around expanding teacher mentorship and leadership opportunities. So this is tightly connected to what we saw in House Bill 2, Article 2, establishing the prep program allotment. And overall, the prep program allotment really aims to address teacher retention and effectiveness by incentivizing high quality preparation pathways into teaching. On the left side of the screen, you see kind of the reality today, the percentage of uncertified teachers coming into the profession in Texas. So just north of 50%. That's a lot. We've got 30,000 first-year teachers that were hired in the 23-24 school year. So this is a pretty large magnitude. On the right side, you see the potential future state. A couple key differences. At the bottom, you'll see an increase in residency, traditional undergrad, and a new pre-service alternative certification pathway. And these three pathways, these new pathways were established by the prep program allotment in House Bill 2 and include funding for these pathways. It's really a historical investment in teacher prep. At the top, you'll see, because the kind of theory of action and future state is we're increasing these higher quality pathways into the profession. We're making it more accessible for teacher candidates by removing barriers and providing funding. We hope to decrease the number of uncertified teachers that are entering the profession. And overall, if we're doing that, given the data we've seen, if those trends stick, we could expect to see a decline in teacher turnover, leading to fewer teachers needed in Texas schools, fewer first-year teachers needed in Texas schools over time. All right. So with that, that's kind of a backdrop of where the prep program allotment came from, some of the challenges we're seeing in the state, and kind of the hope and path forward with this new policy. So at a high level, the prep program allotment really is a historic investment in teacher recruitment, preparation, and mentorship. It's a first-time investment of this sort in Texas, and I think we will be leaders across the nation in terms of the work that we're doing here, investing in teacher prep. Overall, this program represents a $400 million annual investment in recruitment, preparation, certification, and mentorship, really available at scale. Secondly, this represents a reliable funding stream. We often get questions around like, well, what's going to happen? Like, is this money going to be there the next year? A lot of folks asking us, we've got grant programs that come and go. We hear that question a lot. And while I have no way to predict what the future holds, this is an allotment. It's written into the foundation school program. It would take an act of the legislature to repeal this program for it to go away. So it is a more reliable funding stream. And again, districts will not need to reapply every year for this funding. Thirdly, this program supports over 200 educators per LEA. We'll dig into the numbers a little bit more later in this conversation. But really it has the potential to impact at scale the vast majority of our districts across the state. And then lastly, the ability to reach over the 5.5 million students that are part of our Texas public school system. So you've heard me say several times now, this program is really focused at improving and strengthening pathways into teaching, or the pipeline. We really consider this a pipeline strategy that spans across early recruitment, starting with high school students, through preparation, pathways into becoming certified, high quality routes, and then mentorship for those first couple of years that a teacher is employed on a campus. And so the prep program allotment has 5 programs across these 3 phases that provide funding to support the work of school system and ed prep program partnerships. These are the 5. So in the recruitment bucket, we've got the Prep Grow Your Own program. And then for preparation, it establishes 3 new programs: pre-service residency, traditional, and alternative programs, and also establishes a prep mentorship program. I want to pause here and just say some of these names probably sound familiar. We've had an enhanced teacher certificate in Texas for a while now. Some of you may have participated in our residency TTRPR or past TEA Grow Your Own grant programs or the mentor program allotment. This work really is, and this policy is built on the foundation of a lot of work you all have been doing across the state as educator preparation programs, as school systems, piloting work, championing the work, growing the work, providing feedback on these new initiatives. The PREP program allotment in House Bill 2 has several requirements that mirror past programs TEA has run, and also some differences in these requirements. So just want to mention that as you dig in, if you've participated in some of these similar programs in the past that TEA has run, you will see a fair amount of similarities, and you will also see some differences. So our hope is through this overview webinar and then through our subsequent deep dives into each one of these programs that you can start to link what looks the same and what might be different for your school system or ed prep program. Okay, so of those 5, these 3, Grow Your Own, Residency, and Mentorship, are available in the LASO Cycle 4 process. So our applications are currently open. They close on December 3rd, and those applications are for implementation in school year 26-27. So you can think of this school year as the application period, and next school year as the implementation period. For those of you that may have clicked around in the application already or looked at the PDF version of the application, Again, LASO is one single application, but there are different sections that you'll be filling out for each of those 15 opportunities that are available. So each one of these programs will be a different section on the application. So you might be asking, like, what about those two other programs of the prep program allotment? Pre-service traditional and pre-service alternative certification alternative programs will be available in LASO Cycle 5 for school year 27-28. So these two will be in LASO Cycle 5, so think application next academic year with implementation the following academic year, 27-28. And we'll be sharing a lot more information about those programs over the course of this year. A quick note on educator preparation programs for prep program eligibility. That's a mouthful. Okay, so under the preparation bucket, pre-service preparation, we've got the residency program, traditional program, and alternative program. As I mentioned, HB2 has established some new requirements that are unique to each of these three programs. And included in that is a requirement that the State Board of Educator Certification approve these preparation programs for eligibility for the prep program allotment partnership. So we will have more information on this in upcoming webinars. But just wanted to share with you all that would be a step in the process. All right, so we will have upcoming webinars to dive deeply into each one of these programs. I'll give you just a second. We've got this also posted on the LASO 4 webpage. I'll give you a second just to scan this and see which ones may be of interest. All right, and just a reminder that all these webinars, the PowerPoint decks and recordings of the webinars would be posted to our LASO 4 cycle page. And with that, we're about to dive into a little overview of each of these programs, but a quick reminder, each of these programs is going to have a deep dive, so feel free, put questions in our Q&A and we will post those on a rolling basis in our FAQs online. Or if you've got a notebook handy and you're really interested, say, in the residency program, maybe drop them in the notebook, join that webinar and see if the question gets answered there. Either way, but we'll have more information coming down the line. And I think I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Melissa, who's going to share a little bit about the residency, pre-service, and grow your own programs.
Thank you, Allie. All right, well, we'll kick things off with a look at that residency pre-service program. As Allie has noted, it is the only pre-service program available for the 26-27 school year. Fortunately, statute allows for us to implement the program in that first year with the teacher residency programs who have already previously been SBEC approved. So that's super helpful. But going forward in 27-28, all of these statutory requirements that Allie has already referenced previously will be requirements for implementation of those programs. And really, like, at the core of these requirements, you can see here that these really set up the parameters to ensure that the district and their APP partner are able to implement a high quality year-long teacher residency program for those aspiring teachers. So I'm just going to walk us briefly through some of these core requirements. With the first being that the candidate has access to the practice-based preparation in a year-long residency model. This requirement is actually consistent with what is already in current SBEC Chapter 228 and Chapter 230 rule for the teacher residency route. So teacher candidates will have access to that year-long clinical teaching experience with 750 hours of co-teaching under the sheltered practice of a high-quality cooperating teacher who we also call a host teacher throughout that entire year prior to becoming a teacher. They will also be trained and prepared by their educator preparation program with state-developed content. And we'll provide more information about this as well in the residency webinar. But for candidates who are prepared in EC3 or EC6, there is a statutory requirement that those candidates are prepared with the Reading and Math Academies. And then there will be additional Commissioner of Education designated content, such as classroom management and training to effectively use Bluebonnet Learning as one of the open education resource, high quality instructional materials, for example. So we'll provide more information about that in upcoming sessions. But again, this is a requirement for the 27-28 school year. It is not a requirement for the 26-27 school year, where programs who are already approved to offer the residency route are going to be approved partners. And that will be very abundantly clear in the program guidelines and application. The third thing on here is the requirement to establish formal partnerships between the district and the educator preparation program or programs. So there may be more than one that a district is partnering with, and that is just fine. But that district should have a formal written agreement with the programs that they are partnering with to make sure that that candidate is, one, getting prepared and the program is meeting all of the requirements of the program, but also truly, like at the core of it, through these written agreements, we're able to prepare candidates to truly meet the needs of the district and that LEA's vision for instruction, for example. So we'll talk more about that in a bit as well. And then the final thing is that this enables high quality year-long preparation that is also paid, right? So in the allotment, it will enable success and needs-based funding. And I'm going to actually have Ali shift to the next slide where I'll explain this final criteria for sake of time here. So when it comes to the funding, wanted to take a look at this funding snapshot for the Prep Residency Pre-Service Partnership. I'm going to do my best to break this down, and we will break this down even further in the residency webinar session. But this snapshot in front of you shows the funding that may be generated by each of the up to 40 residents per year in a district. So a district can have up to 40 paid residents through this allotment per year. So we're going to walk through this. Again, funding is generated to flow to the LEA through our foundational school program, and it will also be generated to flow to the EPP directly. So there'll be two direct funding flows. It's the first thing to know up top. All right, so we're going to walk through this now, though. When it comes to the initial funding that's generated by each teacher resident, there is this set of initial funding that is $12,000 per resident. That when that's generated, there are requirements for how that funding is used. So the first requirement is that $10,000 of that $12,000 will flow directly to the teacher resident, and that will be utilized for the teacher resident's pay. That $10,000 is 1/2 of the minimum amount that that resident must be paid for that year of their teacher residency. So the LEA would need to figure out how to at least match $10,000. We're not limiting it to 20. You could pay them more, but there's a minimum $10,000 match for that alongside that initially generated set of funding. The remaining $2,000 is meant to flow directly to that cooperating or host teacher who will be supporting that resident in that year-long practice. Again, this is a minimum amount. The district and EPP partnership may choose to pay that cooperating teacher, host teacher more than just the $2,000, but this is meant to support. So from there, the resident participates and completes all their residency program requirements, and they successfully attain the enhanced standard certification at the end of that year. At this point, a second set of funding would flow to the district or LEA. This is the success-based funding because they've completed that enhanced standard certificate. This amount is up to $16,000 with a $2,000 base that would flow regardless of any other factor. So every single candidate will generate $2,000 of success-based funding. And then dependent upon the rural and high needs factor that pertains to where the candidate is placed, and we'll go deeper into this in the next webinar session, the candidate may also generate anywhere between $0 to $12,000 more dollars, depending on the needs of that campus where they're placed. And then finally, if that candidate is getting certified in special education or bilingual, they could also generate an additional $2,000 to reach that up to $16,000 threshold. All right, so the candidate's been successfully has successfully attained that enhanced standard certificate. The next step is the candidate will work in a Texas district as a teacher for an entire year. Once the candidate has also attained that additional milestone, the next set of funding will flow directly to the EPP. So it is not going to the district to the EPP, it is going directly to the EPP. And that amount is $10,000 per candidate, and then an additional $1,500 if that candidate has completed the math or reading academies. It's a lot of information, y'all. Oh, I have one more final thought. Allie probably noticed this and didn't move on. We have an asterisk next to the 40 residents up top. And that is because if a district is seeking to fund more than 40, they can fund up to an additional 40 more candidates at the rate of funding that pertains to candidates who are being prepared in the traditional or the pre-service alt cert. It's a lower funding allocation between $10,000 to $21,500. For the sake of time today, we're not digging into that, but we will provide a visual of that in the residency session. Excellent. All right, so we're going to move back along the pipeline and take a look at our Grow Your Own program, which really supports those recruitment efforts of districts as they seek to develop their a locally sourced talent pipeline with their IAG partner. So in this particular program, there are several statutory requirements that I'm just going to highlight here today, and we'll have a chance to go deeper soon. So the first component here within this program is to ensure that these candidates these employees within the Grow Your Own program are able to earn a bachelor's degree. So during the course of the implementation of the program, the district, alongside the support of their IG partner, will ensure that the employee, paraprofessional, it could be a different employee as well, is able to, one, enroll in a bachelor's degree program, but also that structures are in place to ensure that they can actually complete the coursework while still working full-time as, for example, a paraprofessional. During this time, to make sure that paraprofessional also gets to completion of that bachelor's degree and at least enrolls in an EPP, they'll also need to make sure that there is appropriate transition supports provided for that individual. So this may look like advising and other supports to keep them moving along the way to attain those goals. The second piece here, so I've spoken to the employee and the requirements for that employee to get that bachelor's degree and enroll in that educator preparation program. During this time, it's also critical that that employee is gaining access to early teacher training. So they'll need to have opportunities for on-the-job training that minimally include the opportunity to work under a mentor teacher, a cooperating teacher, and to practice teaching. And then there's, of course, other ways in which that employee can also gain that on-the-job learning and training to develop those competencies, those key competencies as a teacher, such as high-impact tutoring models, for example. Districts who are participating in the Grow Your Own program must have a set of employees who are going through the program, but they will also be able to prioritize growing future educators through the implementation of a high school education and training and our CTE pathway that really starts to motivate those high school students to build interest in the profession and hopefully enter into those employee roles. And then finally, we'll take a look at funding for this program. All right, so Grow Your Own's a little simpler than residency. Thank goodness, huh? So we've got here, again, it will fund up to 40 paraprofessionals per year. All funding for the Grow Your Own program flows directly to the LEA as the only receiving individual or entity of that funding. When it comes to use the funding streams, again, there's initial funding and then there is that set of success-based funding. So we're going to walk through these briefly. Each Grow Your Own employee annually will generate initial funding of $4,000. That's the base, to up to 2,000 additional, so up to 6,000. If, for example, they are placed on a campus that generates additional funds for that rural and high needs factor. When the employee completes their bachelor's degree and at least enrolls in an EPP, they would generate the second 50% of that total amount. So between 4 to 6K. So in this model, 50% upfront, 50% upon completion of those success of those key milestones. One thing I will name here, all funds received and generated by the Grow Your Own employees must be used to implement the program, but there is a lot of discretion for that district to make some really critical decisions to support the program's implementation. So, for example, the district may decide to use those funds to fund tuition, wraparound supports for those specific aspiring teachers, but it may also consider how do we reinvest this into the development of our high school pathway, or consider using those funds for district level support to manage oversight of the Grow Your Own program. There's a lot of opportunity here to think about how to use these funds, and we'll provide more examples in the Grow Your Own webinar as well. Turn it over to my colleague, Ricky, for this one.
Thanks, Melissa. I appreciate it. Before we hop into information about the Prep Mentorship Program, I just wanted to remind everybody, I see some awesome questions coming in through the Q&A. Keep them rolling. We are going to answer each and every one of those questions in the Q&A through an FAQ that should be posted around the beginning of November. So just a reminder there. And now we'll hop into a little bit of information about the Prep Mentorship Program. So we have looked at programs revolving around recruitment, around preparation, and now we're looking at the support of new teachers in the classroom. So the Prep Mentorship Program focuses on supporting beginning teachers. And so those are teachers in their first or second years of teaching in their own classrooms. And the program supports 3 key areas. So the first is providing those first and second year teachers with trained mentor teachers, and they'll be providing coaching and support that's aligned with the classroom pedagogy standards. The second piece is that Prep Mentorship Program will provide those mentor teachers that we mentioned just a second ago with high quality research-based training through the agency-required Texas Mentorship Training. And my director of the mentorship team, Kyla, will be talking just a little bit more about TMT in a little while, and we'll go into a deeper dive during our Prep Mentorship webinar that'll be taking place tomorrow. And the third piece is that the Prep Mentorship Program will provide school systems with the financial support to implement strong mentorship programs, including funding for training and also mentor teacher stipends. All right, so now the Prep Mentorship Funding Snapshot. We're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like. So you can see up in the top left corner that there is a statutory cap of 40 beginning teachers per school system per year. So the Prep Mentorship Program provides $3,000 per beginning teacher in the school system. So the number of new teachers in their first and second year is what generates the allotment for Prep Mentorship Program. And of that $3,000 per beginning teacher, The mentor teacher will receive $1,000 per beginning teacher assigned, and that comes from the school system. So the funds go to the school system. School system provides the 1,000 per beginning teacher to the mentor teacher right at the beginning of the process. So, throughout the process. A portion of funds must be used on that agency required Texas mentorship training. So it's important to note that. And if funds remain after the stipends to the mentor teachers or the required Texas mentorship training, those funds may then be used on mentor training and or strategic staffing training and or additional mentor teacher stipends. Allie, you're muted.
Thanks, Ricky. We've got a set of webinars coming up for the prep program allotment, starting with mentorship. We had one yesterday, another one tomorrow, and then starting on the 15th, we'll have residency and grow your own webinars. Both options have the same information, so feel free to tune into either one of those. All right. So with that, we've kind of walked through what is LASO, where did the prep program allotment come from, how did it evolve, got into a little bit about information about each of the programs involved in the prep program allotment, and now I want to spend some time talking through application specifics because you might be interested in accessing this funding or participating. So first we'll start with eligibility. Who is eligible and who will be applying? We use the term school systems throughout this webinar and in our program guidelines and posted materials for the prep program allotment. And this term, when you see school systems, it refers to districts and charter schools, so it encompasses both. We have a definition here of charter schools, and I'll give you just a second to read through those 4 bullet points below. All right, and we're going to dig in just a little bit more into the second and third bullet points as it impacts eligibility. So Senate bill operating partners that have a charter granted under Chapter 12, Subchapter C of the Texas Education Code are eligible applicants for the prep program allotment. A couple specifics around how funding and applications and written agreements will work. So first, with funding, SB 1882 operating partners are subject to the statutorily based funding caps described in each of the prep programs guidelines. So you just heard Melissa and Ricky walk through how many participants could generate an allotment for each of the programs. So overall, operating partners would be subject to those caps. SB 1882 operating partner leaders will receive links to their applications. If you are on this call or listening to the recording and have not received a link, you may request one through a form on the LASO website. And then also written agreements as it pertains to operating partners and partner districts. The money for this program will flow through FSP, the Foundation School Program. And because of that, SB 1882 operating partners must have a written agreement with the partner district to document how allotment funds generated through the partnership will be spent. So if there is money that will be moving to a campus for a dedicated purpose that an SB 1882 partner operates, that should be written out in an agreement between the operating partner and the partner district. A note on adult charter schools. So charters that have a charter granted under these sections of the Education Code and Human Resources Code on the screen may participate in the PrEP mentorship program only. Adult charter schools are not eligible for the pre-service and therefore the grow your own programs. And I'll unpack this a little bit. Next to that little gavel, you'll see a note in the Texas Education Code for the PrEP program allotment. Written into statute is that PrEP pre-service programs must place teacher candidates in pre-kindergarten through 12th grade classrooms. Additionally, we'll talk about this a little bit more in the upcoming webinars, but to qualify for a PrEP grow your own program a district or a school system must also apply to a pre-service program, and therefore grow your own adult charters would therefore be ineligible also for prep grow your own programs. Here are for any of you looking for light reading. No, but in seriousness, the requirements. We've gotten a lot of questions about what is required for each of the different programs. HB2 Article 2 established several new sections of the Texas Education Code related to the prep program allotment. So you'll see there a list of definitions, and those will be further defined. There will be additional definitions in the Texas Administrative Code. We're going through that rulemaking process. So you'll see the different sections for each of the prep programs. New Texas Education Code 21909 provides a high-level overview of those program standards and performance goals. And then Chapter 48157, that includes the funding formula for each one of the 5 programs. So we encourage all applicants to read the relevant sections of the Education Code for the programs to which they'll be applying. Note at the bottom, we anticipate posting rules for the prep program allotment during this school year. We actually anticipate that the Commissioner of Education rules will be posted for public comment in December, and looking for a late spring effective date with those. State Board of Educator certification rules. We had a discussion on some proposed rules at our last SBEC meeting in September, and those will be moving through the SBEC and subsequent SBOE processes. And again, both those sets of rules on the Commissioner of Education and prep side, SBEC side, we hope to be effective before the beginning of the 26-27 school year. A huge thanks to those of you on this call or listening to the recording that have engaged in stakeholder feedback. This legislation was signed into law in June, and our team started working on engaging with stakeholders right then in June, actually, to gather feedback on these proposed rules, and have gotten several rounds of feedback over the past several months. So thank you for all of you that participated in that. A quick note on reporting and program monitoring. To calculate allotments, TEA is going to need to gather some information. Also, to engage in the periodic reviews that are a requirement of statute, we will need to have access to some information as well. I will say our commitment as a team is to try to streamline the process as much as possible for ed prep programs and school systems. So we are really trying to limit the amount of additional collections, but some will be necessary per the requirements in statute and to implement this program effectively. In our current plans, as we are mapping things out, we know that school systems must at minimum submit identification information of prep program participants. For example, residents, and we're setting this up in ECO, so we're starting to build the IT side of this. Reason there is that the allotments are calculated based on who the teachers are and where they are placed. So that second bullet is campus placements. Again, there's for the pre-service programs, grow your own. The amount of funding is dependent upon the campus. So we will try to streamline that through an ECOS collection, and we'll be sharing more information at a later date. Thirdly, report spending of the prep program allotment in a format that we will share down the road. We will likely model some of this off of reporting on spending for like the teacher incentive allotment. And then ensure program participants, such as residents, beginning teachers, and mentors, complete annual program perception surveys administered by TEA. Just a note at the bottom around adopting rules and verification of participation forms, which we'll talk about in just a moment. There are, partnership is a word in the acronym PREP. It's preparing educators through partnership programs. So preparing and retaining educators through partnership programs. So what are those partnerships? For Grow Your Own, a written agreement must be established between a school system and an institution of higher education or an ed prep program for implementation in the 26-27 school year. The same is true for residency, a partnership between the school system and ed prep program, which may be an IHE. And then for both residency and the prep mentorship program, cooperating teachers for residency, these are oftentimes also referred to as host teachers. And then mentor teachers for the mentorship program must complete the Texas mentorship training, and we'll share a little bit of information on that in just a moment. Online, we have several resources available. One of them is a role and responsibilities insight tool. It breaks it down by superintendent, board, kind of C-suite individuals. campus leaders, teachers, what some of their responsibilities may look like. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's intended to bring a little bit more clarity to the types of responsibilities and time commitments for those individuals. So we encourage you to check that out online. In terms of the application process, your school system or ed prep program might go through several steps before applying, but at a high level, we encourage you all to look at this overview document that we have online, read the program guidelines for each of these programs, engage stakeholders in conversations before submitting an application. Quick on application reviews. There will be no interviews with the prep program allotment, and our teams will be reviewing applications to ensure they meet the eligibility requirements and agree to the statutorily based assurances. We also have standard contract language in alignment with recent executive orders. So if you are engaging in, drafting an MOU, a contract, these partnerships must include this language in their contracts, and this will be posted to our website. All right, with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Kyla, who's going to share a little bit about the Texas mentorship training. So Kyla, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Allie. Before I jump in, just want to name that we're going to be real quick on the Texas mentorship training today, and we'll go much more in depth tomorrow in our prep mentorship webinar. But just to rename what my colleagues have shared earlier, the Texas mentorship training is required for the prep pre-service residency and prep mentorship program. And again, we'll talk more in both of those webinars. I'll share a little bit about what the Texas mentorship training is. But I do want to note that before this mentorship training has even gone to pilot, it has been shared with a number of stakeholders who have provided feedback, including EPPs, campus and district leaders, and teacher leaders. And this Texas mentorship training that is a centralized mentorship training, it meets policy requirements for the training of all mentoring educator roles, including mentors, mentor teachers, cooperating teachers, and host teachers, including those requirements for the prep mentorship and residency program. This Texas mentorship training aligns with key TEA initiatives, such as the Leadership and Instructional Foundations for Texas LIFT program, which is also an opportunity through the LASO application. This training aligns to the classroom teacher pedagogy standards, as well as the T-TEST system. And it is delivered by certified Texas mentorship training providers, including all 20 education service centers, as well as a few additional providers, which we'll share more about in our mentorship webinar. Again, on this slide, you can see when those mentorship webinars are. Our next one is tomorrow at 12:30, as well as when the prep residency pre-service program webinars are.
Thanks, Kyla, for sharing that snapshot. And also wanted to share a little plug for a grant program that we run. This is not part of the allotment, so thinking back to grants, there is a Texas Strategic Staffing for Residency grant that will be available in the LASO Cycle 4 process. So as a quick reminder, the prep program allotment, all districts that meet eligibility criteria and commit to requirements are funded. That includes the prep pre-service residency program that provides funding for several things, including partial funding for a resident salary that school systems must match. To meet that match, or if districts hit the cap of funding, have more than, say, 40 residents, they might be interested in the Texas Strategic Staffing for Residency grant that can help districts think about how to reinvest, reallocate, identify additional sources of funds to meet those match requirements, or potentially bring on more than 40 residents. It does not provide funding that can go directly to the resident, but can help districts as a technical assistance service to help them think through some of those shifts. So the Texas Strategic Staffing Grant, there are 50 awards available. This is considered a competitive grant process, and selection will be based on tiers that are explained in the program guidelines. Given that the Texas Strategic Staffing for Residency grant is intended to support residency implementation, to apply for that strategic staffing grant, school systems must also apply to the prep pre-service residency program. On October 15th and 23rd, my colleague Corliss Bunkley will be leading an hour-long webinar on this grant opportunity. So if you are interested, if this has piqued your interest and you think you'll be applying also for the residency program, please tune in at that time. All right, a couple notes wrapping up here on path forward and next steps. Again, please join our webinars for more information. We'll be doing a deep dive into each of these opportunities. Given that this is not a grant, however, there are some differences in the steps and timelines after a school system submits an application. And those differences are in the areas of awarding, verifying, and funding a school system's participation. So on the left side here, if you joined any of our other LASO webinars on grant programs specifically, you will see the same timeline for each one of those other 12 grant programs that are not an allotment. So this is a screenshot of what you would have seen or will see in those webinar presentations. On the right side here, we've put the backdrop of this timeline in green color to distinguish it because there are some key differences and we want to walk through those. Okay, so what is the same? I said everything up until the award announcement is going to be the same, regardless of if your school is applying for a grant or a webinar. I'll give you just a second to read through that text on the left side of the screen. And I know many people listening today likely wear several hats at their district or charter and might be applying for several programs. So wanted to stamp that these steps and these timelines are the same. One difference is that we're going to be doing application reviews. For grants, you'll see scoring. The dates are the same, but the action that TEA will take is different. We are not scoring and prioritizing based on priority points. And we are reviewing to make sure school system applications meet eligibility requirements and are agreeing to the statutorily based assurances. The award announcement will be the same for grants and the prep program allotment. We anticipate around February 2nd, sharing award announcements with school systems across the state. An additional step for the prep program allotment is this verification of participation form and submission of written agreements. We anticipate that to be in the April, May, potentially even June timeframe. I have a slide to talk through some of that. What won't be part of the allotment process is e-grants and NOGAs. We often get questions about this for other allotment programs we run. Since this is not a grant, there will be no e-grants, and since this is funded out of foundation school programs, we'll share more information about that in the coming months. Quick note on verification of participation forms. So we mentioned that this is an additional step for prep program allotments that will happen in the late spring, early summer timeframe. When we send award announcements on February 2nd to school systems across the state, we will have a lot more specific information around these verification and participation forms and written agreements, but wanted to preview what the step is and why it exists at a high level. Given that we are still going through the rulemaking process, we want to make sure that all school systems that receive their preliminary award have a chance to review the Commissioner of Education and SBAC rules related to the prep program allotment and agree to those guidelines and policy in the Texas Administrative Code. A couple key points. School systems must submit these participation forms by the dates that we share, and we'll share those dates on February 2nd. You also may decline your participation through that verification and participation form if you see some provisions that you feel like would not be the best fit for your school system. We'll also ask for the estimated number of prep program participants in that verification and participation form. A couple of quick points about written agreements. So as mentioned, pre-service and grow your own programs will need to submit written agreements to TEA. We'll share more information on February 2nd when we send out those guidelines. But the written agreement of partnership must at a high level articulate how the partnership will implement all requirements participating to residency or grow your own, and articulate that the partnership has read the proposed Commissioner of Education rules and applicable prep program guidelines and describes how it is going to implement all of those requirements. A couple supports, we get a lot of questions of, will you be providing verbiage or templates or models? The answer is yes. Once you've been approved to participate, our staff will provide guidance on the submission of those written agreements provide templates and several examples for folks to complete those agreements. As we wrap up, a quick reminder, applications are due on December 3rd by 5 p.m. There's a request for application link form on our website if someone in your school system has not been able to access that yet. We really encourage folks to look at the PDF of the application. Qualtrics you can click around, but there's a PDF that just shows you all of the questions in one spot. So you can even print that or use it as a form and work as a team to answer the questions and compile on all the information before you get into the actual Qualtrics submission. Applications also must be signed by the superintendent or operating partner official for SB 1882 partnerships. So just build that into your timelines as you're thinking about that December 3rd submission timeline. If you're looking for a quick one-pager, we have a to the administrator address correspondence that we posted, I think back on September 18th, that provides an overview of the prep program allotment. So feel free to circulate that with any team members. And lastly, we've got some upcoming office hours. We'll be updating FAQs kind of on a rolling basis until February 3rd. And February 3rd will be the kind of deadline for our team to respond to all of the FAQs that we've received through these webinars. At the beginning, I mentioned that we'd have email addresses for each of the programs to share at the end of today. These are managed. Sometimes when I send them to, request to the email that doesn't have a name on it, I'm like, where is this going to? But this will go directly to folks that you heard from today. On the screen, we monitor that inbox. You'll likely receive an automated response that says, because we're in the application window, we will not respond to questions one-off. We will take all the questions we receive from the field and add those to our FAQ document to really ensure that we have clear and consistent communication out to the field. And we also kind of like bundled like questions together for just clarity for the field. A couple additional notes. We've got some upcoming webinars, application windows. Encourage you all to visit the LASO website, register for those additional webinars, and then peruse the resources available on the LASO 4 website. And thanks so much to our LASO team for posting all of that. I thank you so much. We're a few minutes over today. We had a lot of information to cover. Thanks for hanging with us for those of you that did. And please feel free to reach out to our team or drop in the chat any questions. And again, we will not be responding individually, but we will be incorporating answers into our FAQs. We'll keep the webinar open for an additional 3 minutes. So if you have any lingering questions, please feel free to use that Q&A feature, and we'll be sure to get those questions answered through our FAQs. Thank you all and have a great afternoon.